Beautiful. Okay, my name is Adam Towner. I am the Director of Operations for the Rice University Claude Builder Club. We host events and represent Claude on our campus. I think it's a really exciting time. I get to be in like the private group chats with some of the people at Claude. And they are much more scheming than you would think. They're talking about how excited they are. GPT's releasing ads, Claude's releasing co-work, and they're really excited for the time. So I'm hoping I can sort of share this excitement with y'all. But before you get into that, I'm sure y'all are all very people. I'm not gonna waste your time. So first, I would like to hear I don't know if y'all wanna go around or like raise your hands. I would like to have a better idea of like what y'all are interested in learning, what y'all do, or what y'all find particularly interesting, because if I give you a generic lesson, you're probably not gonna get that much out of this. But if I understand that you're maybe you're working in hardware, or you're working with NVIDIA and you're able to work with some of them on the databases, right? Servers. Yes, they're servers. It allows me to have a much better way of providing useful information to you. So is there anything y'all are particularly looking to learn, or something that y'all work in a space and I can try and tie the lesson into that and maybe find a way to make this more useful to y'all? Would someone like to start us off? Yes, thank you.
So I am completely new to this space in terms of AI. I've done vibe coding for the past like 6 months, but I really have no prior coding experience. But I come more from a UI, UX kind of design background. I've done a lot of graphic designing, and I've been blending vibe coding with my UI design knowledge and prior just web development. So right now I'm building a project. I'm trying to create like an app that can be used by property inspectors, commercial real estate property inspectors. And I'm essentially using Cursor and Claude to build this out, but I'm struggling to connect sort of what I envision the app being itself on the mobile phone, and then connecting it to like a web hub where they can use it on their computer once they're back from a property inspection. So kind of, I guess what I would love to learn is how to connect those, so the data is centered in one hub, and then having it transfer over from the mobile app to the web hub. That's kind of what I'm interested in. It's kind of what I'm, I guess, facing right now as a challenge, really.
Yeah, okay. I will take note of that. Any other important points or anything someone wants to cover or wants me to at least address? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a general question.
Yeah.
Well, specifically on Opus, what's the maximum amount of lines of code has anybody seen the quality of Opus deteriorate?
That is a good question. Very targeted one.
It's a factor of how much entropy builds up in the code base over time, right? So if you start with a really strong structure, you can go much, much further. Yeah. So if you start off like not with any like clue as to what you're going to architect to begin with, you're going to get a mess within 100,000 lines of code. But if you start off with like a very clear plan as to how you want it to look, you can get into the millions no problem.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anyone saw it, but Cursor's internal team just created an entire browser from scratch. Yeah. They had it code for, I believe it was a day or a week straight.
Yeah, that was a fully automated harness too. They didn't give it like a software architecture spec to begin with.
Yeah.
They just let it do its own thing.
And what was your question?
Oh yeah, I was hoping out of this kind of workshop was to learn more about how to build agent skills and just like agent MD or instructions like Claude MD, how to like kind of like architect that in a way that's personalized for you or your team, because that's something I'm hoping to apply to my team and organization as well.
Okay. And I already planning on touching that, so that's good. I'll take 2 more, or if there's one more, yeah.
So 2 things. One, I just want to see if we get a chance to talk about what's trending right now, which is like Ralph loops.
Yeah.
So we could talk a little bit about that. And then another thing is talking about like personal AI infrastructure, and like how to set that up for yourself, things like that.
Okay. That is the forefront. That is the forefront of right now. And I've seen people like use Claude Code beyond just coding, but giving it the actual tools and framework to like sort of run their lives. I think that's where it gets really exciting.
Yeah, that's.
I just want to add something on Ralph loops.
Yeah.
So the way that I've been doing it for a couple weeks now is it's not just like make a batch script and have it iterate on the same idea over and over again. What it is, you have an exception, and when it triggers, it calls the Claude SDK. It's call it self-healing code.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't want to use this liberally, okay? Claude will mess things up, okay? But if you have something that's like, I have this thing that I need to run overnight, I'm not 100% sure it's ready, but I'm tired of working on it. You just throw in a self-healing code exception, and you go to bed when you wake up and have a problem.
You're gonna have to show that.
I think.
I can't conceptualize what you're saying.
It's literally just a try-catch that makes a call to an SDK to instantiate a new Claude instance, and you just give it like all the information it needs to work on. Like you pass it the exception, you tell it where it is in the code, you tell it where the code is, and it just goes to town.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do the workshop next month.
I will.
That's
Yeah.
a workshop.
See-
That's a
I think
little
at
bit
the end,
too.
when we're doing like the practical workshop, if somebody like has something really cool, you know, the tap to share thing is very easy. So
Yeah.
if you have a laptop, anybody can take over. You know, Adam, it's your workshop, but if you feel like somebody's got something to share.
Yeah, no, feel free to cover the Ralph loops at the end. Like for those who don't know, like Ralph loops are kind of like blowing up right now. So feel free to touch on that at the end. So before I continue, you might be wondering who I am, what are my qualifications. I did tell you I am from Rice. I'll sort of give you a reverse pitch. I spent high school studying physics and psychology research, and about 6 months ago I started programming, and 4 months ago I discovered like sort of AI, getting into that. So I'm super recent. I mean, you speak with devs in this space, and a lot of them, they'll say their GPT for their GPT Wrapped was I was in the top 1%. I was actually in the first 20% of users, so I was part of the majority. However, I have realized, and what I'll touch on is, speed is really the key when it comes to AI. I've been able to speak to a number of people who run companies, someone who's exited two to the tune of a couple $100 million, and they said like, and they're like in their 70s. They've seen the rise of mobile, internet. They said they've never seen adoption and technology so quickly. And if you do not get on like the next S curve, like while it's new and like understanding it thoroughly, someone else is going to eat your lunch. So that's just sort of what I'm touching on. Like we are at a point where yes, you can get on the curve and maybe you can catch up with people. But the thing is, a lot of technological innovation, people miss out on this decline. Because, so for example, when you're looking at the first storage memory, let's say you're a company, you can invest in 4-inch or 8-inch hard drive disks. Well, 8-inch disks are technically better right now. But in 2 months, maybe 8-inch disks are at the mature phase. In 2 months, 8-inch disks aren't even going to be selling anymore. And it'll be 4-inch disks. So our goal is to essentially know the point at which we need to get off a mature technology and get on it when it's starting to accelerate. Because this is the reason that companies like Meta and Google and Microsoft have been able to stay around for so long. And there's a thing called Google Graveyard. They have invested in and killed off tens, hundreds of companies. And it's because they invest in everything that could possibly be the start of an X curve. This curve may be 50 years out. Like Google Glass, Meta is now currently making glasses. Google was investing in that like 10,
Waymo is one of them. Google DeepMind.
Yeah. So our goal is to essentially be at these early curves, because if we don't, this curve doesn't just flat out. It gets eaten by these other curves. And of course, we don't want to be eaten. Or maybe we do. So why is this important? What is in it for you? Believe it or not, there are billionaires betting on us. I'm not sure if you've heard this. Sam Altman is in a group chat with some other billionaires, and they're essentially betting how soon someone is going to create $1 billion company by themselves. And believe it or not, there is technically now the feasibility to do it. And that is with Claude Code. I'm not sure if someone saw the famous tweet, but essentially in one of their newest updates, almost all of the code pushed was entirely written with Claude Code. Yeah. And then even with Cowork, it's sort of blowing up the internet. So it's super relevant if you want to stay ahead of when it comes to jobs, if you're working on a company, ensuring that you innovate. A lot of the traditional SaaS companies, companies like Y Combinator, a lot of these VCs, yes, they're there to profit from it, but their entire job is to understand what innovation is happening. And a lot of them are betting that traditional SaaS is going to be at least somewhat upended by 5-10 person companies, which are outputting more code than 100 engineers. So I think it's really relevant from a jobs perspective, from a technological perspective. Who you are and what you're able to do is now sort of magnified with AI and code. So it's really relevant, maybe if you're running a nonprofit or whether you're trying to move up in your company. It's sort of useful in a number of different ways. So A lot of people might worry that AI is going to take their jobs, but as Jensen Huang famously said, someone who's using AI will. So maybe by the end of this, we can be experts in AI, maybe not take someone's job, maybe one person's job. So overview, believe it or not, someone said who's working like internally at Claude Code, they generally use it somewhat vanilla, like they're not using a bunch of different subagents and everything. However, it is super useful for consistency. And like you said, I think there are two main reasons you are going to be using all of these tools that I'll cover. That is for consistency in larger projects where you need a clear spec sheet, you want the architecture understood, because AI is a thinking machine. And yes, you could give your intern like 20 years and yes, they could probably build Google. However, it's not gonna be the best quality. There's gonna have to be a lot of rechecking. However, if you divide it up and you give that to maybe like 20 different interns and they're all working on small different subsections, the quality will go up, the speed at which they're able to do it. And eventually, so the goal of this is to make it so we technically have the technical capabilities to build things like Claude Code or Cursor or whatever companies that are printing out money right now, and sort of apply that to our daily lives. So getting into it, things can go really wrong when you're working with Claude Code. This person blew up because anti-gravity deleted their drive partition. It essentially went back too many directories and it removed all folders. So,
really bad about it.
Yes.
I said it did.
And then the AI tried to fix it, and in doing so, it made it so he couldn't recover it. So for those of us here, before we continue, and I'll go over how we can prevent that happening, does anyone want to give us like a 10-second, how does AI work? Anyone who's read the attention is all you need paper, yeah.
Transformer architecture, large amounts of data that was fed in to train it, to this day essentially.
Yeah.
And it's just predicting token by token by token.
Exactly. It is taking everything you give it and it's saying like how related are these things, and it's essentially outputting what could come next to it. There's a lot of different ways you could think about AI, a number of different metaphors. It's sort of like a black box, and now we don't know entirely what's happening. I like to think of it as a person, I'll be honest. When I ask you what's your favorite fruit, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, there was that one time I ate cantaloupe and I threw up. But I don't know that. You're gonna say, I like pineapple. So essentially when you're speaking with an AI, when I do it, I'm thinking, how do I get the best tokens out? It's trained on this vast quantity of data. And when it comes to code, it's trained on a lot of specific issues. But sort of when I'm interacting with it, the question is, how do I get to those useful tokens? So it's sort of this black box. And so for example, if I'm asking it, what are the current implications of fusion reactor technology? Well, this one I was like, what are the interactions of that gassy hydrogen thingy that all those smart people are working on? And it gives me some general data. But if I ask it specifically about tokamak design and inertial confinement, these are some of the most cutting edge fusion technologies for reactors. It gives me specific long-term roles, major hurdles, and what they're specifically good at. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is that garbage in, garbage out. If you want specific information, if you want consistent information, you're going to need to give it consistent and quality prompts and context. There are a number of different methods to do this. I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen the role play. You've seen like output format, like output in MD format with these specifications. Another one is K-shot. So essentially like you give it an example. These are some of the basic ones. But again, I'll come back to the example. It can be hard when prompting AI to think, okay, I'm gonna use this specific technique, I'll use this specific technique. I would really recommend thinking, if I was going to ask someone to complete something, what would I tell them? Where do I want them to go with it? You'd have a clear picture in your mind. And I was speaking with someone who essentially gets people elected with AI. Essentially, they use AI for mass campaigning. Say what you will about the American democracy system, but they are paid millions to essentially get people elected. And they said they'll have projects and their best devs will fail on them. It's because a lot of them struggle to communicate clearly with AI. He got one of his sales teams to hop on it. He explained them the technical definitions and generally what the code was happening in the code base. And their salesperson was outputting better code than the people on the dev team using Claude Code. So when you're interacting with it, try to communicate as clearly as possible. This is why we're shifting away from prompt engineering to context engineering, because it's about giving it structure of how to respond, giving it key information, and telling it what you want to do. So as a general framework for prompting, I would say that is relatively useful. And finally, I heard this one from someone at Claude. I call it the intern method. So essentially, if you have Claude generate like spec sheet, and you have it reviewed, it'll be like, oh my gosh, the spec sheet's great. Or if you're like, I created the spec sheet, it'll be like, wow, you did a great job. If you tell it, our dumb intern drafted the spec sheet and compare with online documentation, it tends to be a bit more harsh and will generally do a better job of comparing it with other things. So feel free to use this. Yes. So, oh yes.
Are we going to get your slides?
The slides, yes.
Yeah, we'll post them probably online on the Discord
Yes.
or something about, yeah.
So you can.
If you do this, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with this, it's usually an indicator that it's really high quality. You don't even have to review it that much.
But what I found is that if you actually, if you actually say dumb, like you're kind of priming it when you do. If you say a student has done this, and
It's different, yeah.
you don't use any adjectives, you actually, and it's a grade the student, assess their weaknesses. You actually get quite a balanced review then.
Yeah.
If you place a positive or negative adjective, it tends to bias it one way or another.
So it reflects your own self-image.
Yeah.
If you're not confident in yourself, say our dumb intern. If you're like fairly confident, maybe be more neutral.
You just try and remove all emotion. Just say,
Yeah.
a student has provided this.
Well, yeah.
Blah.
The other thing is you say the other LLM has supplied this. Can you believe?
Yeah.
And then they tear them to shreds.
They love to gang up on Grok too. So
Yes. It is a bit of exaggeration, and yeah, if you tell it dumb, it could write the best code, but if a dumb intern does it, I mean, kind of like what you're talking about with the transformer architecture, if it's a dumb intern, then it's probably a dumb spec sheet. So in generally, try to do less but better. Try not to repeat yourself or give it a bunch of context, because like you said with the transformer architecture, it is comparing every single token to every prior token. If you give it a bunch of tokens, you're repeating yourself, you're giving it lots of words, you're giving it an entire book. I don't know, sometimes I'm coding and I'm like, here's Lord of the Rings to entertain it. It tends to not output, it doesn't have the best output. So try to remove as much as you can while including as much as necessary to get the key output. So for those of you who do have Claude Code, or those of you who have some means of accessing it, I was going to take like 5 minutes right now. Try, if you have some idea or something you would like to build tonight, to go ahead and open up and either create your own specs document or to go into like a browser or like GPT or Claude and ask it to create a implementation plan for that. And this is sort of where we get to be interactive. Whatever app or maybe some tool you want to build, now's the chance to do it.
Can somebody just give an idea?
Well, this guy was asking about architecture earlier. You know, because the solution to this problem is an API endpoint, right? That just connects to a database. So
it's in the back end.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard solution, right? So if you take that question as to how you architect this and get a spec for it, like we'll see very clearly like how you go from something that you're struggling with right now to actual architecture that can be built. You know, like the actual. The way I like to do it when I tell it is the first thing is to break it down into like a layer diagram, so we see like where all the communication is happening. And then once you have the layer diagram, it's pretty clear you can build anything else you need from there.
Did you say create like a implementation plan?
Yeah,
So
create.
start in plan mode to try to.
You can do it in the browser or in the like Claude Code IDE. I generally, when creating plans, do it in the browser, only because I found it's better at accessing things from the internet. When I'm using it, Claude Code, it'll only use maybe like 20 or 30 like internet searches. However, in the browser, it is willing to do a lot more. It's willing to go through other GitHub repos. And I find it a lot easier to manage without it starting to create a bunch of MD files. So if you do have a computer, maybe say create like a PRD or like a spec sheet. And like you said, like laying out that architecture.
So that reminds me of something I helped a guy with a few weeks ago. He was trying to make SaaS app for dog grooming businesses, okay? And now it sounds like that shouldn't be too difficult, but you have to think you're scheduling finite resource people across tasks of varying length, and you want to saturate and optimize the usage of the people across this, right? So like grooming a dog may take an hour and a half, but walking a dog is 15 minutes. But we don't want to oversaturate our staff. We want them to have time for breaks and stuff like that so we can comply with the law. So how do we optimize for this problem? I don't have an answer for that. That's a really complicated problem. Okay, it sounds really simple, but it's actually really hard if you sit down and try to optimize this. So what did I do? I went to deep research. I outlined exactly what the problem was, how do you solve it. I let it run for 30 minutes, and it came back with an algorithm that it found from a paper that had like no references at all. It was just somewhere on archive. And it's like, yeah, this is like 10 times better. This is what all the big companies are using. Is this one little algorithm right here?
Yeah.
And suddenly, this guy's making a SaaS app that competes with multi-million-dollar companies.
Thank you. That was very well said. And like you'll find like the most random paper on archive. And when it's running deep research, it's able to synthesize a lot of different information. And if you can save it from having to make deep architectural decisions when someone else has already done it, an actual good developer, you've just now saved Claude thinking time, and it's now got a layout of how it could be. And probably take 2 more minutes with like coming up with a plan before implementing it.
When you're trying to create like your PRD or spec sheet, the implementation plan essentially, how do you make it so that it's not going off the rails and making it overtly complex that at one point you're just not able to understand what it's saying? And so that's some of the problems I face when I'm trying to develop like an implementation plan, is that because there's so many ways of doing it, sometimes I go down a rabbit hole where it just becomes way too complex, and then I'm gonna have to scrap the whole thing.
Yeah.
How do you confine it so that it's like just right, like Goldilocks area?
This is a really good question. So like, how do you prevent it from like overcomplicating a plan? Claude Code was designed to be like for industry enterprise ready. It loves being enterprise ready. Yeah. Tell it you're like early stage, your pre-users. This is what one of the engineers from someone I particularly have found a lot of information from. They're an engineer at a company. They're using Claude Code daily. If it's overcomplicating it, tell it that you're like pre-revenue or your pre-users. It sort of hangs in between, oh, we're going to do an MVP, or this is a full like enterprise SaaS app. So it'll either like it'll undershoot it and make it like horrible, or it'll overshoot it and create the most complex thing ever. Tell it to try and think clearly, write clear code. That's what one of them recommended. What?
Should I do like ultra think? Because I know that like keyword or.
Oh, I've heard ultra think isn't always necessary, but someone recommended thinking is better than thinking for Sonnet is better than just Opus. So spending more time, burning more tokens. People don't always view burning more tokens as good, but if you can get really good context, thinking can be really worth it. So essentially, when you're setting these up, try and develop a good context. And I'm going to go in later of how you can sort of save that. But does everyone have sort of like a PRD, a spec sheet, and architecture that they can sort of run through with the rest of this?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm trying to build it out right now.
And this is another reason why I like using the web version. It tends to be much quicker when developing like a PRD or like some specs or something.
Is it like better to develop the PRD on like Google Deep Research and then actually use Cloud to code it, or try to do the PRD on Cloud?
I have tried using Gemini and I haven't found it to be the best. But if whatever works for you, I've also.
This format isn't good for it, just because
Yeah.
of the output format. It wants to write like a paper.
Yeah.
Like an essay, and like that's not what you want. But you can, after it's written the essay, you can ask it to make a spec after that.
Yeah.
And then another thing, Claude will tend to want to begin writing code if you are using it in like the desk or the like web browser version. It's going to want to write code. I would recommend specifying, make high-level architectural decisions with avoid writing like large amounts of code, because your goal is to offload as much thinking from the code, the coding agent.
Have you considered building a framework around coming up with PRDs and specs and things like that, so you can do it inside of Claude Code versus having to go to the web? Like for instance, for me,
Yeah.
I used to use like custom commands to do it, and then when they came up with that ask user question tool,
Yeah.
like I spammed the heck out of that and built a skill around it,
Mm-hmm.
so that for every single point, like, okay, what are we building? Is it a new project? Are we fixing a bug? what's going on? Is it just that question you just said about pre-stage, or is this like
Yeah.
end to end? All of that stuff. What framework do you want to use? So it has documents that, yes, we did deep research on, that it references, it reads that first to understand your tech preferences, and then you go one by one by one by one, pretty much just go through an interview, and then it goes out of spec.
Yeah, and that's what I'm planning for later throughout this. I just wanted to start off so that everyone would have something they could at least work with. So I hope everyone has at least some idea of what they're like able to work on.
What was the dog app thing?
Dog grooming app.
So for those of you who do have a Mac or Linux or running Linux, I would recommend enabling Sandbox. This is what prevents the thing at the beginning. If you're running normal Windows, we will hope that you do not delete your entire drive tonight. But if you do,
Can you use WSL? Is WSL like on Windows?
yes, you'll have to go into your settings, and we'll hope that we can make it through tonight because it took me a while to set up that last night. But yes, it does work through WSL.
Okay.
That is Windows subsystem for Linux. And if you are on Windows, I would recommend running your like VS Code through like Ubuntu or whatever you can, because it runs so much more efficiently. Which is to say, my computer used to freeze and crash all the time. So if you can, try use Windows subsystem for Linux. So next, ClaudeMD. This is information that is sent with every chunk of code. People from Claude Code's developer team, they have said essentially anytime there is a major bug or specific tool they wanted to use, they just add it to their Claude.md file. So essentially, if it keeps making the same mistake, doing that, this is also where you're going to put maybe key architectural decisions, what it's building, and something you can actually do is do sub-Claude.md files. So for example, let's say your app is broken into a front and back end. You might have a Claude.md file for your front end and then one for your back end. So what we're sort of touching on, like in the beginning, is that you want to get the best tokens out as you can. And oftentimes what that does is narrowing down its capabilities. Claude Code has been trained on this large corpus of problems, and for it to really narrow down and give you good context and solve those problems, you want to try and narrow this down as much as possible. So try and outline what tools it should be using, what commands, or maybe like the key architecture in your Claude.md file. And this can also be good for establishing workflows. Like you mentioned, let's say your brand or company or your team has specific dev like rules they like to follow, how they like to use Git. Putting in Claude Code or Claude.md file is a super good place to put it. So next is commands. You also brought these up. Essentially, like I mentioned earlier, garbage in, garbage out. You can create a command file in your .claude folder. And what this essentially allows you to do is store prompts. And for example, like you brought up, if you have a specific planning or way you like to do something, what I've also done is, like, for example, running testing or linting or checking my code. You can have a specific command to do that, or maybe to create your plan. These are essentially meant to save you time. Let's say you create a really good plan or a really good prompt. You can then say, run this code through this part of my code base and run this command for understanding what to do. And essentially, that's just a way of saving good prompts. Yes?
So would this be like a perfect example of when you're trying to create like a spec sheet or PRD? Like if you do like, this is the idea, then run it through this specific PRD prompt that I've like beautifully crafted.
Exactly.
Okay.
The goal being, of course, to save you time, follow whatever company or dev team guidelines, and try to get better output. And what I can do is pull up right here. So what you might see in like let's see. So this would be in like your .claude file. You would go here and you would create, I think it's commands.md. And this is where you might put something like your command for reviewing prompts or something like creating a PRD. So this is also, if you want to scan this QR code, one of the people who gave like original talks on ways to use commands, he made a website to essentially host some of commands that he found to be useful.
But when you say commands, do you mean like dash commands?
No, it's
The slash commands.
so commands.
Save prompts.
It's essentially saving prompt. It's like Claude's own thing, and it's essentially a way of like, Claude, run the review my code base command, which you have created yourself, and they would essentially run it. So it's just a way of saving prompts.
So basically, like you have front matter, which like you describe it. You have the tools that you want to allow Claude to be able to use. So if you wanted to use bash tool, if you wanted to use MCP or read or write files, you scope it down, and then you can also choose what model you wanted to use. So if you wanted to be super fast, it could be IQ, or if you wanted to really be like complicated, you could use Opus. But then like you want to follow a certain format. Like you want to follow a certain format and be as like specific as possible, and have like a workflow and how you want it to output what it wants. So like you can utilize, like for me, what helped me with commands is finding a meta prompt to create commands. Rather than like having to think about it myself, I work more on a meta prompt so that then when I say create this command, it's gonna follow that format every single time. And like that's the number one hack for anything inside of Claude Code. You want to build sub-agents, you want a meta prompt that creates sub-agents. You want to make skills, you want to have a meta prompt that makes skills, so that it makes it perfectly every single time.
Yeah, and thank you. Using Claude and this is whenever you try to create a sub-agent, which we'll go over later, Claude is already built in to where if you say, I need a sub-agent to do this, it'll sort of expand upon that and try and refine what you're trying to say.
I found something hidden inside of Claude. Claude actually has a Claude Code Guide agent that they put in there. So if you create something like a setting and you don't know if it's really good, you can ask the Claude Code Guide agent if it's correct, and then it'll fix it for you.
And then
I found that out on somebody's YouTube. I was like, wait, what? They have a Claude Code Guide agent?
You can also use sub-agents. You can tell Claude to spawn a sub-agent to test the command specifically. So we're basically trialing the sub-agent. We're like giving it asynchronous information, so it doesn't have a complete picture. Whereas we're orchestrating with a complete picture, then we grade it when we're done.
Yeah.
We see what the failure modes were, and we adapt the command.
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't think of that one.
Claude Code's like a whole team, and it's like one
It's-
condensed package.
They don't tell you everything that they built into it. Like
You're just like it's like
Yeah.
Easter eggs
Finding
that you
out
just
about
put
it.
in.
Yeah.
It's so open-ended, right? Because like what LLMs are right now is we're executing natural language programmatically, essentially. Right? We're directly taking semantic meaning and we're turning it into something executable. That's an incredibly open-ended thing, right? Like you could do anything that can be computed at the end of the day.
Yeah, so like what I usually do is like let's say I create a feature,
Mhm.
a large repo. I pretty much spent like 60% coding and 40% documentation.
Yeah.
So I create a whole documentation in my docs folder, and something's gonna go wrong in the future, and I have to fix it. So instead of like typing up a huge prompt, I use the previous doc MD file that I created as a context with the Claude MD for it to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So it's like very specific. That's kind of like a command, but the command is like actual bash code to do something specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and if I understand you correctly, like command like differently than the Claude commands, which are like storing the prompts. Yeah.
Like technically storing a summary of what the feature is.
Yeah.
In a markdown file, and so I can always use it in the future if something goes wrong, without having to like type out.
oh, so you're priming the context.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every time something is just create a document for something that can move forward.
Well, your document becomes your source of truth, right? Because Claude's going to occasionally go in there and it's going to tweak things and it's going to break things. You know,
Yeah,
like
you wanna
one
put that in
API is going to become a
Claude.md.
different name at some point. It's like, well, now you're programming, it's like, no, go read your doc. This is how it's supposed to be. Fix it.
Yeah. And thank you for that. It's like you're really trying to get to that specific context, and this is where Claude released like model context protocol, And I don't know how much of y'all have used it. You can even like slash MCP.
Yeah.
You can like interact with these MCPs, which essentially are a way of communicating tools with Claude and allowing it to interface with other programs. However,
We gave up on that.
yes, as
You give up on it.
Skills are just way better, man.
as Claude, even
I agree.
they in this article they kind of talk about it. Claude was designed to write
Build
code,
several MCP servers.
and essentially, when you give Claude like 100 different code tools. So for example, when you first learn about MCP, you might essentially, you're gonna load 12 MCP servers. So essentially what that would do is every prompt you send to Claude, it is now filled with 100 different tools and things it could use. So if you wake up and you have a shovel next to you, you have a hoe, and you're like, oh, what do I do with this? Maybe I go tilling. Oh no, you're meant to eat breakfast. But that's the thing, your plate for breakfast was not right next to you. So essentially, you're giving all these additional decisions to make. So essentially, if you do need to use MCP, essentially the best way to go about doing this is limiting as much as you can. And essentially, in this article, they talk about how it can be more efficiently done. And this is where Claude sort of introduced skills. It is good at writing and navigating code, so it should just do that instead. So essentially, if you need any more like confirmation that skills are the way to go, well, Claude released it in place of it. But for example, for things like, let's say you're running a company and you have to write like billing stuff, instead of creating like an MCP server for it to interact with to get specific like context, maybe creating a skill that is good for that. And Claude has even added like MCP, even building your own MCP server, it's not an MCP server, it's a skill. It's sort of like acknowledged in that, but I would definitely recommend this for those specific things you need to do. Commands and skills, there's a bit of overlap, but
They combine those two again.
Yeah.
Because you can put the
So
command-
just to summarize, I guess for people, tools are things that I guess were traditionally organized into MCPs, but MCPs are an inefficient architecture because
Yeah.
they prioritize. So now skills are a better way of accessing the tools you actually need in a more efficient way for Claude.
But the sad part is they built the whole company around MCP.
yeah,
So like that's like they don't want to let it die. They don't want to let it die.
It's still
So
useful. There's still tons of good uses for MCPs.
yeah. It's just about being like selective with how you use
it's
it.
gonna become a consumer product.
You should think of MCP as like IPC, right? It's like an inter-process protocol, basically. And so if you need something that needs to communicate across applications or across several layers, you want to use MCP. Even if like your version of MCP is you define it to a file and then you send it to a server instead of just making like the actual JSON. It's like the failure mode of Claude is that it malforms the JSON and it'll try again and it'll give up. So if it's something that's complicated, you want it to write it to a file and refine it until it's ready and then send it. If it gets really complicated. But you know, eventually you need things to tie in. So I've been working with a guy who's using a Ghidra MCP. Do you know what Ghidra is?
No idea.
NSA reverse engineering software. Okay, so it exposes all of the features of Ghidra, all right, directly over MCP. He's able to sit down and completely reverse engineer something in hours with this thing. Like he took Ashes of Creation, which uses a sharded server system, okay, where multiple users can exist on a shard and you can seamlessly see people across shards. Okay, they're literally on different servers, they're sharing a Redis database. It reverse engineered the network protocol for this in a day. Okay? The network protocol for this is absurdly difficult to understand in the first place. Right? So like it's stuff like this that MCP servers are really good for. So if you want it to like be able to control your
That's
sorts
the
of things where you need it
those
to
are the
control
only things
software.
I use it
So
for.
one of the ones I made is a Windows harness MCP that lets it hijack any Windows application and just control the UI.
Oh,
Right?
Is
And
that on GitHub? Do you have that available?
I can put it on GitHub. The problem is that the MCP server, I had all the failure modes of the MCP server, so I wound up just turning it into a library, and it just codes it in Python instead. And it works really good. I mean, if you want it, I can put it up on GitHub.
For
But
sure, man. For sure. That sounds like a cool.
Yeah, what were you thinking?
So that's one of the things that I've also been troubling between like the difference between, because even with skills you have a skills.md file, right?
Yeah.
So like you have your Claude.md file, you have your skills.md file. Where is the distinction between when do you use what? Like from my understanding, just from reading and from listening about it, is
Yeah.
MCP is now like it's built inside the skills kind of folder or whatever
Yeah.
structure, and MCP is the new tool, or it's like the wrapper around the tool.
Yeah.
And then you have the skills that MD file is like your instructions to read and understand how to use these tools. But would you say that skills now is like the ultimate way of just like going about these tools? Is don't mess with MCPs itself. Just have it be under the skills like structure itself.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a decent way to put it, and that's sort of like bridging the prompting and MCP in terms of like utilizing tools while like maintaining specific things. Like, for example, like one of their basic ones is like understanding reading PDFs. That's one of the basic skills they like now start off with. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I think like coming back to this, it is useful to think of it as like a person. When you're like with the tooling, if you give it every single tool, it gets really confused. So moving on to subagents, if you are in like Claude Code right now, you do /subagents, you can create your own subagents, be it something, something for testing, or something which I tend to use it for is using it for UI and front end. I don't know if any of y'all have gone to like a website and you just within 5 seconds are like, this is definitely vibe coded. I think yes, it can be really useful, like commands and with skills. If you want consistent output, giving it context to sort of access those like more useful tokens, or to avoid specific ones, like the colors, rounded edges, and like glowing small circles that it seems consistently doing. Subagents could be a really good way to do that, especially when you're breaking down tasks and having a large number of agents building. Specifying skills for them can be really useful for improving your output. Finally, or nearing the end, a lot of research right now is going to like RLMs. Google DeepMind just released a paper on this, but DeepSeek released one, I think it was like a month ago. Essentially what they're doing right now is to refine context. You're essentially wrapping AI with another AI to sort of selectively give it the most important context and most relevant. Because like with the transformer architecture, every time you're asking it a question, it is considering every other token it has in its history. So essentially what you can do is give it not unlimited, but much larger context by essentially neglecting those less important parts. And that's where a lot of things are heading, especially with larger context windows aren't scaling as rapidly as it seems like they are with other areas. But with like novel architectures, context becomes less of a concern. Finally, plugins. These can essentially allow you to download someone else's setup. However, a lot of this like commands, skills, and everything is sort of working towards your personal workflow and maybe like the business you're working with. So plugins can be useful. However, the whole point is that it's tailored to you and what your workflow is. So I found limited utility in plugins. I've tried to use other people's plugins, and I've gotten mixed results.
You got to be on the same wavelength as them.
Yeah.
Is plugins just like other people's versions of skills or commands? Like that's also what I was like. What's the point of plugins if you can just
Plugins can call hooks in Claude code. So like all the stuff that Claude's doing under the hood has a hook that you can tap into. So like you can inject context when something ends in a certain way.
Yeah.
And also really useful like as a product company, like being able to deliver all the things you're doing about cloud skills and stuff inside the marketplace and plugins.
Yeah. So if you want to like, if there's like some like very like thoroughly built out plugin, then.
So I think what they're trying to do is create a marketplace for people to share all their setups.
Yeah.
But as far as for like plugins, what I've dealt with is like you might use somebody else's plugin, but then it doesn't work how you expect it, or there's an issue. I mostly just focus on using the official Anthropic plugins.
Yeah.
Because they actually keep those updated.
They're also
Yeah.
the best.
Yeah, no.
Most of the plugins I've seen don't actually make use of the feature set of plugins in the first place. They're just commands that they put up on the marketplace.
And then they just like follow the little docs to create it, turn it into a plugin.
Yeah. And these are just a collection of things I have heard from a lot of time spent listening to some of the people who are like building with Claude Code daily. Keeping a change log essentially to minimize, like, especially when you're having maybe 8, 20 agents working on a project. If you have a change log specifically for features or maybe like front or back end, every time they make a like major change, adding it to the end of a change log can be useful. Planning mode, this is sort of what we started out with. Some people prefer using planning mode in the Claude Code console. I myself prefer it in the browser, but to each their own. It is really helpful to think it forward through, because if the coding agent is having to both plan and code at the same time, having to make high and low level architecture decisions, I've gotten pretty mixed results. Who knows, maybe having it do it by hand, constantly context switching, it'll work out.
So the planning part, like, it's very helpful, at least in my experience, when the code is there.
Yeah.
And I just tell Claude to go and understand the code, draw diagrams of like the workflow relationships.
Yeah.
And then I can like make decisions and like the next heuristic to explore. Like sometimes you can like plan, and Claude will create a plan for implementation, but I actually end the chat just because the context window is already exhausted and start a new one. So that's where like I find like planning a little bit better on the Claude Code terminal.
On Claude Code?
Yeah.
Like when it comes to running out of context, this is something that I've heard some people stress a lot. I'm still trying to fully understand the utility in it, or fully utilize it. But if you press escape twice, that allows you to essentially go back to prior context. So essentially, let's say you start off and you've like done your Claude Code agent thoroughly understands your front end. What you might do is open another terminal and essentially give multiple agents that same context, and now they're working from that same point, or maybe it makes a change, it runs out of context. You can now go back to where it understands the code base still and the architecture, and then essentially like maybe it works on a different issue or something. This one, tell it prepare to discuss. If you want it to understand your code base, sometimes it like doesn't thoroughly understand enough. However, if you ask it prepare to discuss the code base, I found that it tends to at least go a step further when it comes to researching it. The intern method can be useful. And then finally, running Claude through your GitHub. This is something I started doing recently, and there are tutorials online of how to do this. But essentially what you can do is like every time you like have a Git issue, you can just add Claude. And I've seen people like they're on their way out of work, they'll create like 20 of them, and then by the time they get home, they'll get like 20 notifications that Claude has now like done all these.
Claude Web is really good about spinning up new agents.
Yeah.
They get really good context really well.
And this is like the thing with using it in the terminal. It's only willing to spin up, I think, to like 10 sub-agents. But when you're doing it online, it's like super easy to spin up a ton of them to work on specific issues. So I'd really recommend that. And finally, like, please remember garbage in, garbage out. Just because you're vibe coding, it doesn't take out the thinking. You still have to like think through decisions, which I think is the one reason that devs still have a place in a way. In that someone who's not going to think through what are the specific design and architecture decisions, that's never really going to compare to someone who understands what's happening. So yes, how to win. So there is a person who essentially almost everyone who's gotten into Y Combinator, and I think it was another famous venture capital firm, all companies that were backed, they were watching this one person, so I was curious what's so special about them. And they were essentially saying how to learn through vibe coding, and essentially you want to start treating it more scientifically, try and push those bounds, try and use those newest features, and make notes of those things. Have your own sort of like test for, okay, 5 months ago I tried to have Claude Code build this through one single prompt or maybe through planning, but try and see what it can do now. And for example, I have like multiple test documents where I will tweak prompts or I'll add a new skill and I'll see how it responds just ever so slightly differently. And I think this is really how you go from being like 2x Claude developer to like, I don't know, 10x.
The dumb return thing worked.
Yes,
It actually worked.
It's super good for having like multiple like Because it's stateless, which essentially means like you can give it at any point, like all this context, and like it is still going to understand it the same. So what you can do is just, if you have good context, just try to give that as much spread it as far as you can. The compact, I have spoken with people, compact does not work the best. I've gotten varying results out of it.
Do you have a pre-compact hook?
I do not. I just use that. I go back to earlier context.
You double escape. You're a double escape kind of guy.
I'm a double escape kind of guy.
I do the one
Those people fear the double escape. Guys.
Yeah, but with like companies like Cursor building a browser, I think it is really exciting where this could go. Yeah. Oh, like with like Vibe coded a browser.
It's already out.
Oh well, they haven't released it. They were just saying like this is the extent to which like it ran for a week straight, just coding.
Yeah, they had like a study and they evaluated what worked, what didn't work. It was like they put a blog out on it.
Yeah, so I think it seems the limits are only expanding. So I myself, when I go to sit down to like start a new project, it's kind of like paralyzing because like you can do whatever you want, sort of.
Yeah, they rough loop that browser.
Yeah, I think it's like there's a lot of stuff coming out right now, and people are just like, yeah, Ralph built this, Ralph built this, Ralph built this.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, I think. Wait, could one of y'all like give an explanation of Ralph loops?
It's literally like the most pure form of a Ralph loop is just like a shell script that just calls Claude code and gives it a few sentences on what it's to build. So the guy who invented it, he built something called curse flooding, okay? And what it is he told Claude, make a programming language using Gen Z lingo, okay? And he put it into a little bash script that just ran on a loop. Whenever it ran out of context, it would spin back up. And Claude, and this was like Sonnet 3.5 that he did this with.
They were June of last year.
Yeah, it was a long time ago he did this now. And over the course of several months, eventually Claude built a full programming language that we compile, right? And it's all Gen Z lingo, like.
But I think the biggest part was like it didn't catch any ground until like Opus 5 came out.
Here in December.
And then people started saying that they can run Cloud Code for like 30 hours straight. Like I ran it today, from last night to today, it stopped probably around like 4 or 5 p.m.
Yeah.
On something like built it from end to end. Now it didn't do it as well as I wanted it to. It was just my fault, but I feel like if people learn that part, like learn that part of being able to let Claude just go, long running tasks, but then it's like you're breaking it up to really small parts, like create this folder, close, open up again, create this folder, close up, and it keeps just doing that.
I get so scared. I can't do it.
Yeah, I know. I was so scared, but it didn't break my computer, and I run Cloud Code and dangerous to skip off.
Same.
Oh my.
I don't do sandboxing. I use hooks to prevent bad things from
Yeah.
No, like, so I'm not even worried about
Just
my
wait
computer.
until we're not using LLMs anymore. They're putting their role models.
Yeah.
See and hear and talk and like we're in like the early alpha of AI
Well,
right now. This stuff is stuck in token space, and it's like the alpha version of that. We have a long ways to go.
Yeah, for like those who like haven't like heard like the things happening with world models, like currently they're understanding all this through just like language, but eventually like.
Wait, what are we talking about? We just left Cloud Code. What are we talking about?
So, the world model. Have you heard about like some of the world models?
No.
So essentially, instead of understanding it through language, it's now like intuitively.
It's understanding actual reasoning. It's not just predicting token by token. It understands the entire, like they call it the latent space. So it has actual reasoning capabilities.
So we're going back to original symbolic AI.
Yes, it is. It's a lot more symbolic in that sense. And it's less token predicting. It's more reasoning.
Wait, what do you say?
So for the world models, there's two ways of looking at it. Okay, so like the first thing is that it has to have multimodality. Okay, so the way that we're first training world models right now is we're training them on video games. Okay.
Yeah.
So Google showed off their world model a few weeks ago, and you can just drop it into any video game, and it will start playing the game somewhat intelligently. And it was actually really impressive how good it was at playing the game, right? And the idea is that if you train it in artificial universes, okay, eventually those skills that learned in one universe carries over to another universe, right? And so you compound this learning over time so that it becomes a generalized learner. What you're actually doing is you're not teaching it to do any one task, you're teaching it to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the real big part of the world model.
Because I mean, even with things like like when we first did like AlphaGo, and when it was able to play chess and everything,
how to learn.
It wasn't intelligent. It was just skillful because it played like for a grandmaster. It maybe takes them like thousands of games. It took it millions to get good. It's really slow, but that also like if you have it like go from like chess to like Go, it failed. And like for example, Claude Code, it was trained on like a bunch of GitHub issues. And I think it was Sonnet 3.7 that was especially bad because I think it would, which they had to change. But like you said, essentially now it's learning how to learn, like actually learn instead of just like
generalizing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just today's latest release they just added like some persistent. I was gonna ask you about because one of the things you had up there about like context and stuff like that. I was gonna ask if anybody's using beads as like a way to give persistent memory to your Claude.
Beats?
Beads?
Beads?
I've used beads.
I know
It's okay. I made my own version of it. I made my own version of it that I think is a little bit better than beads, but
so like
I don't find it
my
doesn't
Claude
solve the core
remembers.
problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't forget. Like it remembers what I did yesterday, what I did 5 days ago. Like it has persistent memory. So like every session that I have, it knows everything that we talked about, what we did. It even rates like how the session was, how its answers were, if it got things wrong, if I was frustrated with it. And it's learning, it's constantly learning.
Oh, this is like the memory layer for
That, because what,
the PAI,
yeah.
the PAI system by Daniel Miesler.
I've heard of that one.
Now, to what degree is that integrated in? Because I literally, I don't do this a lot, but I literally just logged into a Claude session and asked a question and it said, oh, hey, remember when we talked about that? And now it's going on.
Yeah, so they've added, I think Anthropic is literally just stealing what everybody's doing and they just bring it out. Look at this new feature we did. But like, they stole it from the guy who came up with it, Steve, whatever his name is. He came up with beats.
Yeah.
And they're using it now. They just released the newest version, I think 2.19, right? And that version now has some persistent memory. So you can run two Claude side by side.
Yeah.
And they can, like if you're running on a full task on this, it knows like not to play with this task and do this one because this other one is doing it.
Yeah. Yes. Because I mean, what I've been doing is I'll just create like an MD file, just call it memory. I think Gemini is the only one who hasn't quite yet, which I kind of find it slightly annoying. Because like when you have like conversations with Gemini, there's no persistent memory.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have persistent
I like
memory, but
Gemini.
it doesn't have context window.
I use Gemini
But
Yeah.
I use Gemini for coding.
Yeah, I don't use it.
Yeah, no.
I don't use Gemini for coding at all, but I love Gemini.
I liked anti-gravity when it came out. I thought it was like promising for long form tasks, but I mean, it's.
I use Gemini for like to know how to fix stuff around the house.
Yeah, that's what I do. I try to do the video and I'm just like talking to it. I'm like, all right, how do I fix this right now?
Hey, this is not working. Can you help me? And it will help you. Like, we'll figure it out.
30-hour task, right? You have the max 2x?
Yeah, I've got the
Have you ever had
20x.
context that?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
But
After
that was
28
like,
hours,
no,
you
that
lose
was me,
everything or
like,
something?
no,
Or-
in a day, like, that was me setting up my PAI system, it was like, that took up all.
Yo, honestly, just use a markdown file for your context.
Trust me, bro, this is different.
No, so what I tried doing is I built an Obsidian skill where whenever Claude would make a markdown file, it would send it to an Obsidian vault.
Yeah,
We're like,
I'm still using it.
Oh no, this is it.
It would go through and it would
well,
bring
I
like
mean,
wiki links between different articles so they could traverse it like a train, right?
Yeah.
But I found that like even that really doesn't solve the problem of memory because it doesn't know what memories it used to have, right? And this is the way the technology works. It's currently not solved. So I built an entire harness out to like automate this as much as possible with AI.
I actually never tried building them all the same,
fair enough.
which is
The problem is
probably bad on my.
You don't park, there's no sense in like following the hierarchy.
That's my entire business.
To build something.
Yeah.
Entire
What is that?
No,
What
I'm
is that?
serious.
Like even in the chat that
Oh.
with
It's an Obsidian vault. You're seeing all
This
the
Obsidian
markdown
vault
files linked
is
together.
connected to Claude, and everything has relationships, like clients, what I'm working on, deliverables.
So the ones on the outside are
It's like, yeah,
disconnected
So it's like a
from
graph database.
It's a
Research,
graph,
yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
Obsidian.
all
It's
the
like a
research
note
and
taking
stuff like that,
application, fully local
So are you
offline.
using PAI, Daniel? Needs
Yeah, I am. That
Is
takes
that
so
the
long
only
to
I
search.
just heard of that article. I
Other
read that
people
article
have-
today.
other-
That was
It's
like,
the most, it's built out so thoughtfully. Like, I mean, I haven't set it up all the way that he has. He literally has it like following him in the world. Like he has a personal API.
This man's
Personal AI infrastructure.
He's got a personal API. Like so, he has everything where he just tells Claude something and Claude knows what he's talking about. And that's what everybody wants. Like I don't want to over-explain and be like, no,
Yeah.
not that, not this, not that. Like if I say, hey, send an email to my wife, you should know who my wife is, what her email is, and how to talk to her. Like,
And you're getting value out of what you've done so far, or you're still
Absolutely.
in the
but
infrastructure building?
but I haven't like there's a lot of personal stuff you have to give it, like a ton of personal stuff, and it takes a while for you to get comfortable doing that, right? But am I getting value out of it? Absolutely.
could you
Right.
connect this to like? Because I don't know if you guys are familiar with like home automation, but the home assistant community.
Oh yeah,
is, like,
yeah. He
really
has
big.
a section for.
That's what I would want.
He
to
has a
use,
section for
personal
home
AI, where
automation,
it's like
yeah.
fully
So, like-
local to me, controlling stuff around the house and understanding that context.
Like if you have like any wearables or something like that, like it
Yeah, like
says
heart
like
rate or
okay,
whatever.
your heart rate last night was this much, or it's this code in your house or whatever. He's got it all the way.
Like
Connected
imagine
everywhere.
cloud code with Raspberry Pi at your house.
Yes, that's what I'm also like. One of my aspirations is to build a local kind of Claude code that's connected to my local home assistant. So it understands my house, it understands who I am as a person, it can connect to my wearables, but it's fully local. So like I own all of my data and code and all of that stuff. And
But there is no local.
there is no
Yeah.
local
Oh,
currently. Not
if
yet.
anyone had any like questions, also like that was sort of everything. I know we didn't like. I was trying to like make the time, so I didn't have time to like stop and like say like, okay, we're gonna build this now. He'll send out the slides, so like you'll have like knowledge on some of the tools. Also, the YouTube videos that like and the YouTubers that I've watched, I'd say like develop my skills with Claude Code. But like especially with what they're talking about, I used not to use any of this, and I could maybe only get Claude Code to run for maybe like 20 minutes. Over winter break, I like started implementing some of this, and I was getting it to run for 8 hours.
That's
And it's a lot of it's just like actually giving it, and it was doing better than when it was doing like 20 minutes, me having to constantly check it. If like you said, setting up clear specs, communicating clearly, and then you're able to run systems where like it's running your entire life.
Are you on double max?
Double max.
I mean, how much?
Oh, so I'm on single max.
Okay. And do you hit limits to the 8 hours?
Yes, and then I'd switch to my pro account. Since I'm a Claude ambassador, they gave me $6 in credits.
That's crazy.
And a pro account.
The guy running the cursor meetup was actually a cursor ambassador, so he was on course. Oh, it's great. You know, but
Yeah.
don't hit any limits.
Remember the cursor ambassador guy? Yeah, at the
Well,
right.
so Michael, do you wanna do some? It seems like we're kind of getting to the end here. Do you wanna do some wrap up stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's
That was
not
when I was coding since 6
I went
a.m.
back down to max 1 because they lobotomized Claude a couple weeks ago, so I'm protesting with my wall.
Isn't that a concern? Like, if we leave it running, you'll just run out of
We can do
tokens.
it next time. I don't
Does
care.
that mean it's crunching, right?
What happens? The beauty about these
I think maybe just wrap it up. Throw the QR code for the website.
you're not using up all 200K content.
Throw the QR code.
It starts,
Just
you might use
So
up
I've
about
been
20
testing out a
30
lot of
days.
Claude code at my farm right now.
Yeah.
One of my things is I'm trying to build an automation tool for like an HR, for our HR team.
So
So it's just to build like a simple job description automation tool.
Yeah.
I started
we just
building it out
wanted to
with
do,
Claude Code, just
we're creating a
like started giving it the
determinants to
idea,
do, see
but
the
it
test pass, if you test don't
started
pass.
turning into this
I need to read
spaghetti,
up
and I
on
just
that.
like I
I'm
could
gonna-
not understand. It's
So
like
you're
way
not,
too
the
complex,
Ralph's
right?
part
So like
has no thinking, we
at
don't want
one
it to
point,
think.
I just had
We're not
to
focused on the thinking, we're
like,
just focused on. Like,
at
you're
one
like
point it just
Ralph
started doing
Wiggum
all
from-
of this stuff
from,
that I was like, all right,
from
I need
Homer-
to
from,
backtrack and
The
kind of start from
Simpsons, right?
scratch.
Yeah.
He's in
But
there, he
Every
just
time I
keeps
do,
trying.
it keeps
He
getting
just
way
keeps
too like
trying.
loaded,
He's not thinking
and
about
so
what he's
much
doing.
starts
He's just so
happening
persistent
that
that
I
he
don't
becomes
know
successful.